Test, test, test. Okay, good. Okay, so we just have to get the audio going over there.
Okay. Should we go over together? Or do you want me to just go over?
Yes.
Well,
Now that this is going.
you need to be the captain over there too.
Yeah. No, that now this is going, I can move.
Yeah, yeah,
Other days I've just sat, but.
yeah.
I'll be good. I'll go find those. I'll sit right here. I'll sit right there.
So let's go ahead and get started if we could.
Hey.
It's 4 o'clock, so let's,
There's no audio yet. I heard it.
okay. So if we could do some introductions. I'm Jason Bench, I'm the planning manager for the city. We'll go around the room, just introduce yourselves, and then we'll start the process. We don't have a chair or vice chair, so we're going to do that voting process. So let's do the introductions first.
I'm Ryan Clark, I'm the Development Services Director. I also function as the Secretary of the Planning Commission, technically, and I sit up on the dais with the Planning Commission as well.
Barry Roberts, Planning Commissioner.
Jim Conde, Planning Commission.
Murray Lowell, new member of Planning Commission.
Amber Pope, also new member of the Planning Commission.
Madeline Coven, new member of the Planning Commission.
Actually, I should probably say I've been here 3 times, so I'm still new to
You're new member too.
Yeah, so
Yeah, you are.
Haysom Sakar, Planning Commission.
Grant Allen, Senior Planner.
Matt Taylor, Senior Planner.
Cheryl Vargas, Associate Planner. And Rachel Becker.
Yes, I'm Rachel, Associate Planner.
And I'm Jesse Riddle, Legislative Counsel. And that's...
Hi, and Ryan's one of the ugliest secretaries I've ever seen. No, did you say you were a secretary?
Thank you.
No. Terry Peterson, I'm the City Council, and part of my responsibility is to sit on the Planning Commission. I'm not on the Planning Commission, but I get to come and observe. Appreciate what you all do.
Okay, so without a chair or vice chair, well, annually anyway, in January, we typically vote for a new chair. So whoever's voted in this time will replace in January through the same process. So you have 2 papers in front of you. We're first going to accept nominations, and really only the planning commissioners have the opportunity to recommend or nominate someone to be the chair. We'll take, if you wanna go for a few nominations, or if we don't get any, then we'll just vote and see how that happens. So if there's any nominations, we'll then vote. The winner of that tally will be the chairman, and then we'll do the same process with the vice chair. We'll have them take nominations, and then we will vote. And then once those two are established, then that person will run this meeting, and of course, the next meeting as well. And every meeting that they attend this year. So, I will entertain any nominations that you have for chairman.
I'd like to nominate Hazen as chair. Mostly so I'm not.
Is that
Is it seconded or?
No, if you want to do another nomination, or if somebody wants to close nominations, we can do that as well. No other nominations? Okay, so if you guys want to vote, and then pass them back around this way, Ryan will tally them up, and then we'll rock them around and get a bunch of.
So we're writing yea or nay.
Write a name.
Is that anything?
Right in the,
Okay.
You still have a chance to change.
I think they're going this direction. This way, so.
This way. I wrote Jim's name.
Everybody?
I do.
Grant, but this one, where the berries open.
Oh, Grant's it.
Yeah.
Somebody has really small handwriting. I'll get my glasses out.
Steve, do you want to introduce yourself while we're in a
It's
little,
unanimous for Hazen.
since we all introduced
Do you all want to
ourselves.
introduce yourselves?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let Ryan do his announcement first.
So Hazen,
Yes.
will you accept the chairman, being the chairman of the planning commission?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so Hazen is now the chair. We will now do vice chair. So be glad to take any nominations if you guys have.
No, nominate Jim.
We're gonna nominate Barry.
You
So two names?
So Jim or Barry, do you want to then vote, and we'll, same process. Or I guess you could do a write-in if you rather.
If it's a tie, it's Hazen.
That's true, there's 6 up yet.
You ready?
Wait, you already voted, so there's
I already voted.
rock, paper, scissors.
This is dangerous. Uh-oh. It's like Barry. Well, somebody put Perry's, I assume that's Barry. So we have 4 for Barry and 2 for Jim.
So Barry, you okay being the vice chair?
Sure.
So in the event that Hazen is not available, Barry will run the planning commission.
Sounds great.
So we'll turn the time to you, Hazen.
Turns out to be, okay, well, first of all, I want to welcome all the new planning commission members. Thanks so much for coming. We know it's not the funnest day to start, but it's a really good way to show what you believe in, what you want to done with the city. I'm not sure if the city has any handbook or.
So if we could just take a few minutes, Steve's just kind of giving kind of an overview of what
Yes.
the duties of planning commission are.
Correct.
Then we'll get into the items of business.
Great, Steve,
Okay,
lead the way.
so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Steve Earle, I'm Deputy City Attorney, and I'm the legal counsel for the Planning Commission. And maybe just give you a little brief introduction. The primary role of the Planning Commission is kind of twofold. The Planning Commission deals with ordinance change amendments, which you evaluate, look at, and then you give a recommendation to the City Council. So that might include something like an application to rezone a piece of property, or an application to modify the standards of an existing zone or something like that. It's something that we commonly refer to as a legislative type of matter, because that involves making or changing a law. So that's something you don't make a final decision on, but you make a recommendation to the City Council. And it's always really helpful to have a discussion when you can and give your reasons why you favor or don't favor something, because then the city council has an opportunity to see the minutes of your discussion and to, you know, maybe see issues that they wouldn't have thought of otherwise. So you can play a really helpful role there. The second aspect of your duties has to do with what we refer to as administrative actions. That's where you review an application that usually a landowner makes for approval to do some, what we call a land use application. Typically that includes either a site plan, which a site plan is how somebody's going to develop their property, how they're gonna lay out the buildings and the parking lot and the accesses and those kinds of things. And your role there is just to basically review that to determine if it complies with city ordinances. And if it does, then your obligation then is to approve it. And if it doesn't, then your obligation is to deny it. But that's an area where you don't have any real discretion. In other words, you don't get to say, I like this or I don't like it. It's just a matter of, does this comply with the law? And if it does, the law says you have to approve it. Sometimes that leads to uncomfortable situations where, you know, neighbors might show up and might not like it, but, you know, if it complies with the law, then you just really have no choice. If it's really something you don't think is appropriate, then you obviously could, you know, suggest to the council they consider amending the ordinance so that kind of thing doesn't happen again, maybe. But the other administrative item that we commonly see are plat vacations, or I should say amendments. Maybe that's a better word to say. So a subdivision plat is for those of you who don't know, it's just where the land is subdivided, you know, usually a larger parcel may be subdivided into smaller lots, and so that they can, you know, sell it off or whatever, develop it independently. And typically, you know, you're looking to see, does it meet the minimum lot size? Does it meet the lot width requirements and things like that? So again, your obligation is to approve it if it complies with the ordinance. So those are the two types of applications that you see most commonly, and what your responsibilities are. Maybe just a word about, you know, you've got a chairman who knows how to run meetings now. He's been here for quite a while, so I won't go into how to do that. But basically, maybe a word about how to make a motion. Once an application has been heard, and the discussion is over and you're ready to take some action, typically what happens is one member of the planning commission will make a motion. So, and that's just, the way you would say that is just like, I move that the planning commission do this. And that may be, I recommend the planning commission or I move that the planning commission forward a positive recommendation on this site plan. Or I move that we forward, or I move that we approve this plat amendment, something like that. Then typically there's a second, somebody else agrees with that, and then we obviously have a vote. Majority vote, you know, carries the day.
You want to mention, usually they'll read that's on the agenda.
Yeah, so we try to have language here that's helpful to you in making a motion. If you look at your agenda, so just as an example.
On the staff reports, usually where we have that.
Okay,
We also have a slide.
I'm just reading off of, I don't know if you have this in front of you, but say 3.3, where it talks about amending section 22A3. I won't read all of it, but you might, as a reference, you could just say, well, I move that the planning commission forward a positive recommendation to amend section 22-5-3A and the zoning map, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can kind of just use that as a prompt on the language you would use. And again, the distinction is when it's an ordinance like this, you would be moving to forward a positive recommendation, or it could be a negative recommendation. Or in the case of a site plan or a plat amendment, you would be moving to actually approve. On those items, you're the final authority. It doesn't go on to the city council. You make the final decision on those kinds of items. Anything else on that? You guys want to?
I would just say, if you're in the meeting and you have questions about procedures, you can always ask Steve about what should we do now.
Yeah. If you want help on, well, how do I say this, or how do I phrase this, or you know, how do I do this? Yeah, I'm always there to give you suggestions. Sometimes I'll give you suggestions when you don't ask for it. So, let's see. Maybe just a quick word about open meetings. You know, there is an Open Meetings Act law in Utah, which basically means that any official business that you take in your role as planning commissioners has to be done in an open meeting. So what that means is you can't get, and basically 4 members constitutes a quorum, right? We have a 7-person planning commission, 4 constitutes a quorum. So if you're with 3 other of your fellow planning commissioners, don't talk about city business, well, don't talk about an application that's coming before you. If you wanna talk generally about, things that are going on in the city, that's fine, but nothing that's gonna be coming before you. Don't talk about, obviously, yeah, I think we should vote this way, or I think we should do this or do that. Save those kind of discussions for when you're actually in an open meeting. It's okay for you to be together, have 4 people, if you happen to meet at Summerfest or something and you're in a group, you can talk, you can chat, that's okay, that's not a public meeting, as long as, again, you're not talking about public business. Okay?
Thank you.
Just,
Thank you. No, that's
Oh.
great.
okay. Is there anything else you wanted me to cover on that right now? This is really quick, because I know we have other stuff to
I
cover.
think that's okay. I forgot to mention that Ross Spencer, I don't know if all of you know, that he did resign from the planning commission. So the council will be looking to the council to appoint another member of the planning commission, so it'll happen whenever that happens.
Whenever it happens.
So,
Sounds great. I think we should move on to the items on the agenda. Unless if there's something else to cover, and I will definitely use the assistance, you guys.
So let me just make one other quick comment, if I can, on pre-meetings.
Yeah.
So we typically have these pre-meetings before the regularly scheduled meeting, and the purpose of these is for informational purposes, to answer questions, to give you background information, stuff like that. Technically, we're not really supposed to make a decision here, and that, I don't think I've ever seen that happen, but just a word of caution. You wanna wait till you actually have the public hearing or the public meeting, because there may be input from, the applicant, from citizens, that kind of thing, and you wanna still have, an open mind to some extent. You can have opinions, that's fine, but it's best that you haven't already actually made up your mind for sure before we actually have the hearing, so.
And the public hearing is normally about 3 minutes.
The public hearing?
Public hearing, whenever somebody has a comment. It's just
Yeah,
3 minutes.
typically if somebody wants to speak at a public hearing, we give them 3 minutes to talk. If it's an applicant, they usually have as much time as they want, within reason. But yeah, when somebody from the public or a neighbor wants to talk, their comments are typically limited to 3 minutes.
My turn? And just so you know, you each will have a monitor in there, so you don't have to be looking to find a screen, big screen. You'll have your own personal one. I don't know if that makes you feel better or not.
You have a name tag too, so that's how you find your seat.
And please speak up, so everyone can hear.
That's the thing, if it's not to the microphone, it's not recorded, because the audio will not pick up anything not in the microphone, so you're just wasting your breath if you're not talking. People who call out from the audience, it doesn't pick it up. All you hear is a dead space, so if you want to talk, make sure you turn your microphone on. All right, first item up is 3.1, Calls Place. They want to build 3 buildings out about 1200 North Geneva Road. They will be office warehouse space. This is what they will look like. They'll be building 1, 2, and 3. The building 1 and 2, they're similar in everything except for building 2 is a little bit bigger. Building 3 is smaller. So in building 2, the only difference is that the individual units are bigger. These are the elevations of what they will look like for buildings 1 and 2. And then building 3, again, it's a little bit smaller. These are the parking requirements, so they have met the overall requirement. The parking is based on size of the building. Warehouse space gets a different parking requirement than office space does. And if you want me to explain that, I can go into more detail. If you want, just let me know. Landscaping, they also have to provide landscaping. They have a plan, they have to stick to it, so when we go out at the end of the project, we take the plan out, we inspect it, and they approve the landscaping. This is what the buildings will look like, the concept plans for buildings 1 and 2, building 3. These are the floor plans. And you've probably seen all this in your packets before. This was all in your packets, so it should be familiar. But again, if you have questions, this is what it looks like now. They will also be providing a cul-de-sac and an entrance from Geneva Road, and then coming from the south, there is what we call Orem Technology Campus, where they're on their building 6 right now, the same type of similar buildings. And there will be a road that comes from those buildings through this development also, be next, in front of building number 3. So we recommend that you approve the site plan for Call's Place. And do you have any questions?
I do. I think it was at a city council meeting last fall when I assume we weren't looking at the site plan, but there was a rezoning.
They did a rezone. They went from
So that's already been approved. We're not worried about
highway
the rezoning.
services to PD 36, which brings them into the same zone as the Orem Technology Campus to the south. They were on the border, so we just moved the border from highway services down to include, or up, so that they could be in the PD 36 zone.
Are there any risks or issues we need to be aware of that haven't been highlighted?
Typically, we don't bring an item to you unless it meets all the criteria. The only issue on this one, because UDOT hasn't finalized the access agreement on Geneva Road, that's why there's a condition. Typically, we try not to bring projects to you unless there's no conditions. On occasion, there'll be 1 or 2 just because it's difficult to work that out before. So that's why you see this one. Normally, there will not be conditions. So I guess you can, but that's why we're here, right, to review. But we don't bring things forward unless they meet, in our opinion, the requirements.
And so when you make your motion, you would include this condition as part of it. All right, item 3.2. So the applicant wants to change the property line. This is how it is existing now, with the larger lot kind of wrapping around the smaller lot. So, but this is what the new plat would look like, changing that rear property line on lot 2 to make it bigger. Lot 1, they're both owned by the same person or people, but they want to make less lot maintenance on lot 1 and more lot available on lot 2. So they worked with themselves and came up with this solution. They both agreed.
They worked with themselves and they
Yeah.
both agreed.
Yeah.
I'll make sure I'm clear on that part.
Yeah, yes. You want to make sure you're getting along with your neighbors, right? So this is what the existing plat looks like. This is the proposed plat. It just changes that rear property line. And this is what the street view looks like. And then we recommend that you approve this one, to vacate the current plat and put into place the new plat with the new property line. Any questions on
I
this
saw a
one?
lot of utility easement stuff around this. Is that original property line?
So utility easements follow the property lines. So when we change the property line, we have to move
Oh,
the
okay.
utility easements to go with it.
So it's not that they're using something there, it's just part of,
Right.
okay.
Any new plat you see come in will generally have a utility easement all the way around. And then they'll come in, I don't know, I think we've had some since you've been here, where they come in and they'll vacate one of those easements. Maybe they want to put a pool back
Yeah,
there.
the one up by the
Or,
canyon.
yeah,
Yeah.
so they cannot put a pool or like a retaining wall on an easement. Or a large garage, anything over 200 square feet, they can't put on an easement. So they have to come in and get approval from you to vacate that easement. But first they have to get letters from 5 utilities. Okay, so that's it. Any questions on any of these? All right,
That's it. Let's go to the regular meeting.
do you have your own plug? Okay.
See if Okay, the other item 3.3 is a proposed ordinance amendment to rezone portions of State Street back to the original zones that were in place prior to June of 2018. And then in addition to that, making some modifications to take out in section 28A, which refer to the State Street Master Plan or other elements that were related to that. So first off, these are the proposed changes. So these are the districts up on the north. That's north, this is the Hub University Parkway, State Street, some of the Arts District, and the Sarah is right here. This is the city center, and that's right there. So basically going back to the original zones, you'll see, for example, Target was originally a P zone, so plan development, one, that was kind of the first one, I guess, back in the day, yes. So we're proposing those, this was the 7-Eleven area, that was the high-density housing there. ED 37 was also part of that high-density housing. So we're basically proposing to go back to that exact same configuration, not proposing to change any zone that was in place in 2018. This is a Canyon Crossing, Canyon Parkway, excuse me. Stay in that 16th North, going back, the entire thing will be C2. There are some pockets of residential that it's going to go back to trailer park, different things that will be rezoned back to the original configuration. Any questions on the rezone portion? So we've listed all the zones that are applicable, and obviously we're not going to go through in this location. It's basically all of these exhibits are going to be part of that resolution, same that's going to the city council. So when they rezone it, that exhibit will be attached, and so we'll make the changes based on the exhibits that are part of the ordinance, resolution here, ordinance of the city council. Any,
So there were some comments, I didn't understand whether they were valid or not. A couple of people said, well, I might be interested in putting a townhouse there or something, that was a 2-story type thing that didn't seem exactly like a home, but if we put it back to the, my thinking, and I don't know enough about the zones, was that that was probably allowed under the old zoning or not?
no, twin homes would not be allowed.
Twin homes would not be allowed,
The only-
would a condo or a townhouse be
The
allowed?
only option for it, so twin homes are allowed as long as it's in a PRD, planned residential development, which requires at least 1.5 acres as a cohesive development to develop. Then you can get twin homes, you can get townhomes in that development. But a standalone residential zone does not allow for a townhome, twin home, or things like that. It would have to be a specific unique zone that's created that the city has. Really, the only one right now would be a PRD. A PD is an option potentially in the future. Right now, they're not allowed in any residential zone or any zone within, or any zone within 500 feet of a major corridor. So 8th North.
Yeah, so these are roads, and I assume it's surrounded by commercial zones, so that basically takes all housing away from any residential development in any of these areas, is that right?
It does.
Essentially, yeah.
Basically in the R6, so that's going back to the R6, so single-family homes. There's a lot of fourplexes and duplexes and things in that little area. So they're legal non-conforming, so they could, they couldn't redevelop. If they wanted to tear it down, they couldn't redevelop it back as a fourplex. If it burned down, yes, but they can't just redevelop their property into another fourplex. They'd have to revert back to the original underlying zone, which is R65. Then go to 6,500 square foot lots, but it's a single-family home only zone. So we don't currently have any zones that allow duplexes except for the PRD zone. So all these zones basically would eliminate anything other than single-family homes going back or redeveloping.
And have there been any developments under the current, the one we're moving back from, have there been, that will then be out of compliance when we?
So there's 3 applications pending. One at 16th North Lofts, which is still under review. The Meadow Gold property, there is a property under here. All the way to the top, where is it, right here, this piece? That came in and wanted to do some townhomes, but they did not get a complete application prior to the moratorium coming out. So once this gets done, they'll go back to R65 and would not be able to proceed with their application.
Are any of those applications complete, incoming applications?
That's still pending, so.
I'm not in the
But nothing, there are applications, but nothing has been actually built.
Nothing has been built under the standard, no. The bank up on 1600 North area, the Alpine.
yeah, that's the only one
That was built at its own, they voluntarily moved it up and built it. They came in prior to the district actually being established, so.
Outside of these rezoning sections, are people able to do twin homes and?
No. Only in a PRD.
Oh, right.
So if you have 1.5 acres, an orchard, let's say, you wanna come in and propose twin homes or those type of things, there is an avenue to do that. But that is a zone in and of itself, which has to come through the process. Planning Commission would make a recommendation, and then the council would actually rezone the property to the PRD and tie them to whatever specific layout or plan that they propose.
Sure.
So that's the option. So any single-family home or single-family lot could not do that.
And a couple of great examples of those are Penny Lane on 8th East, right?
Yep.
And Peachtree or something over there.
Peachtree on South Center,
Yeah.
or West Center, sorry. Okay, everybody okay? Or questions? So I know it's probably really small print, but let me just go through some of the modifications that we're proposing.
Actually, I can see it since it's that far away.
You should have an online version, right?
Without worrying, but
So part of the changes would be, excuse me, taking the setback, let me show you a different view first, and I'll go back and explain the ordinances. So what we're proposing is right now the ordinance requires a 15-foot planter strip and a separated sidewalk. In reviewing the ordinances, the council has chosen to keep that as a standard. So if somebody comes and chooses to redevelop, let's say they want to tear down the restaurant, rebuild their restaurant, they would be required to, because majority of State Street is curb gutter sidewalk, right? So they would be required to put the 15-foot planter in, set the sidewalk back, similar to what we see on this property here with the city center. And then they would be required to put a 15-foot landscape setback behind the sidewalk. And then they could build either their building at the 15-foot setback, or they could choose to put their parking. So there is no stipulation on whether that has to be, that's up to the property owner to determine where they want to develop that. The only requirement that the city would state is this requirement right there, 15A and 15. The other requirement that we're proposing in the change is if this is a residential zone, then they would have to have a setback of at least 100 feet in order to build to the maximum height of 48 feet, which we're proposing to change as well. So right now, the C2 zone, for example, is a 60-foot height. We're proposing to change it to a 48-foot height. But in order to build 48 feet, you'd have to be at least 100 feet from a residential zone. Within that 100 feet, you could build a 35-foot tall maximum structure, but you'd still have to be 35 feet. So there's still a provision in the ordinance that requires it to be equal to the height of the setback from a residential zone.
And if you decide to build a 35 feet with 35-foot setback, can you tier it? Can you just keep going?
So
Can you make it one bigger building
if
and
it's
keep
straddled
going
here,
up in height?
if it's straddled here by, for example,
Yeah.
this portion could be 35, this portion could be 48. But you couldn't, I mean, you'd have to straddle that 100-foot setback. You couldn't,
Oh, you still have to, okay.
you wouldn't be within that 100 feet to be able to get 48. You'd have to be outside of that 100-foot setback.
Could they extend that building all the way to, and build another one next to it, that's up to the 100 feet setback?
This way?
The smaller one, the smaller building,
You
can be extended all the way to the 100 feet?
It could. Yeah,
They
it's
can extend
provided that it meets this 35-foot
Yes.
setback, and it's not more than 35 feet.
Okay.
And obviously, when they add a building, they're gonna have to meet the parking requirements, they're gonna have to meet the landscaping requirements, those type of things. So there are other parameters that, go into designing the property. So they're not gonna be able to put, the entire lot with a building, because you're gonna have to have parking.
Parking, can they do the parking indoor, like inside the structure, if you need to?
It could,
So you can have inside parking?
yeah, there's no provision that says they couldn't have indoor or underground or anything like that.
Okay, so they essentially could build the whole thing and have all the parking required indoors or underground?
They could.
Okay.
And in fact, the way the ordinance is written now, they could, come and build underground here,
Uh-huh,
as long as the 15-foot landscape strip
it's
is
on the top,
on top.
okay.
That's not, we're not proposing that, that's just current.
It's available, so, yeah.
So, just to, hopefully that gives you a little better understanding. So the 15-foot landscaping, that's behind the sidewalk. That's what this first line is here. So basically, that's required anywhere along State Street, so a minimum 15-foot setback behind the sidewalk. We're proposing, like I say, taking it from 60 feet to 48 feet. We're proposing in this section here, in the C3 zone, to go from 60 to 48 when it's within the 150 feet of the C3. We only have one C3 currently. This rezone will rezone Smith's area back to C3. But it only pertains, the 48 feet would pertain within that 150 or 100 feet from a residential zone. Let's see. It just outlines the fact that the sidewalk is required and a 15-foot setback behind. We're basically modifying you've seen buildings that have surrounding, air conditioning and things on top of the building. So that's excluded from the 48 feet, but what we're limiting it to is 10 feet high max and 30% of the overall roof that's there. So we're basically limiting what they can do on that. So somebody could build a 48 feet with another 10 feet on the top, but it's limited to 30% of the structure.
Is there anything that says it has to be toward the back of the building or front?
No.
Or just in
Typically, it's mostly in the
the
center.
middle, yeah?
Let's see, any reference that was referencing the minimum setbacks or State Street districts or anything like that, you'll see a lot of those, appendix SS, those types of things are taken out as well. So a lot of them are more of cleanup and not really substantial.
Can we go back to B1? I had something I wanted to point out, because it's tripped me up every time I've read it. On B1, it says 15 feet, and then parentheses 15. And then on the second to last line, it says the required 10-foot setback. So,
Where would it be?
B1. It says 15 on the third line, and then it says 10 on the second to last line, at the end of the row, in red.
Yeah, we did modify that, so that needs to be,
Just thought I'd bring it to you.
that's probably the wrong side on our part. Sorry.
Good catch. Do we have any gold stars?
You get the first gold star. So I would imagine if you would just point that out in the motion, we would fix it before we get to city council. Thanks for pointing that out. We've read it like multiple times. Anyway, those are all just basically, it's based on the public was tied to the State Street Master Plan, so that's been stricken out. The additional building exception, that was tied to that as well. Usually, or we required the buildings to be brought up to State Street, so that was an exception. If they could only build a certain amount of space, they wouldn't have to bring that up. That's no longer needed, so we've taken that out. The maximum depth of a building is not needed because we're allowing them, the owner, to develop. You know, as long as they meet all the setbacks, as far as the landscaping and the modified sidewalk, then that brings it up to standards. Just renumbering there, and then of course the cross section. So, any questions pertaining to the text?
So let's say someone wanted to come in and build something like what the master plan was recommending with commercial on the bottom, residential on the top.
Not allowed.
They could petition the city, so on this property, can I do this zone, can I provide
Not
this?
the way it currently is written. The PD zone prohibits, it would have to be a PD. Right now, the PD is prohibited within 500 feet of State Street.
You know what a PUD zone is? Does everybody know what a
Plan
PUD zone is? What's that?
Plan development?
Plan development. It's
So
like
it's
a,
specific purpose.
yeah, it's a specific, unique zone that's designed to apply to a specific piece of property and not generally in the city, so.
So, and then that might be an option in the future, and the council would have to then make a few modifications to the PD zone in order to allow someone to come in and request it. So right now, we wouldn't even accept the application. It would have to be that portion would have to be modified first before we would accept the application.
That makes sense. So my point is, there is a path.
There
It could be a path, yeah. Any other questions?
I thought there was, I scrambled through this last night, but I thought I remembered seeing something that, and I don't remember exactly which zone, but if someone wanted to increase their footprint more than 15%, they had to like basically demolish and do what the master plan recommended. This moves everything back to the existing zoning, and so does that go away with it?
So the 15% does, but anyone that wants to have an existing building and they want to add more than 10%, let's say they want to add on another 15 or 20% of their building on the back, they can, as long as it meets the requirements, but we will then require them to flip the sidewalk and do that requirement
Okay.
with any redevelopment that comes in greater than 10%. So the 15% rule was to allow them to do that without, moving their building closer to State Street. This allows them to do their building wherever they want, but if it's over 10%, they will have to bring it up to current standard, which is just the 15, 8, 15.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is existing is grandfathered because it was built under whatever code it was built under. Anything new would have to comply with whatever the new.
So whatever new additions come in, the only real stipulation would be this sidewalk would have to be modified. Yep. And that's at a 10%. That's the
But
current.
at 10%, doesn't that effectively say that if you're gonna change your building pretty much, you're gonna have to comply to the new zone? Because, 10% is pretty small, right?
Yeah, and that's been in existence for years and years, and then we made a special exception for State Street for the 15%. basically, anytime we have a 10% change, because ordinances change over time, stormwater requirements, all that type of stuff. So pretty much if somebody wants to redevelop or add a significant amount to the property, we want to make sure they meet current ordinance. And that's the reason why over 10% it has to go through the whole site plan process to make sure that they meet all the requirements that have changed, if any, over the time. One of them would be the fact that now they have to move the sidewalk.
So basically what they're limited to, I hear, is they're limited to cosmetic changes, really.
If they don't want to redevelop or do any additional thing, they could add a, portico, or they could add an outdoor seating area covered, as long as it doesn't, go over that 10%.
Minor changes, yeah, that's what the code references, is minor changes can be made without having to do this stuff, and that's where we get the 10%.
So if somebody wants
Does
to redevelop.
does that inhibit people from modernizing their businesses and upgrading things?
No, not typically. I mean, if somebody wanted to come in across the corner and wanted to reskin the whole thing, they wouldn't have to come through any other than the building permit, right? If they want to tear it down and redevelop a whole new building, then yeah, they would have to bring it to current strength.
Yeah, so they can do interior or exterior remodels without having to comply with that, but it's just, yeah, if they're expanding the footprint or the square footage of the building by more than 10%, that's when it kicks in.
Is that kind of the standard across cities and, like, what's the normal?
I
What's the
could tell you
typical?
exactly how other cities, but there is a threshold in most cities that have triggered that. Because there's lots of changes. State requires changes for cities to make different rules, and so the only way to catch those is if have some type of caveat that says if you do X amount of improvements, then you're gonna have to bring it up to standard. And that's how cities get things brought up to standard, is they make a significant change, or more than just an insignificant change. That's the rule. Orm's had that for many, many years.
What if there's an existing commercial property with 2 buildings on it that meet old current standard, do you want to add an additional 3rd building that's detached from the current 2? That would,
You'd add both buildings, and then greater than 10% of those would trigger the new standard.
was regulated.
And my assumption is all these changes would be at the business's cost.
Yes.
The other part of this is beautification of the State Street corridor, so if the idea is when things are brought back up to standard, beautification occurs, planter strips, better building standards, better architectural materials, things of that nature as well.
Part of the 15 feet would require trees that would be planted as part of that to beautify the corridor.
Are there any projection how long would it take for most of the city to come to the beautification standards?
Years.
Years.
I know a few business owners. Too pessimistic.
Well, I know a few business owners that decided not to touch the property, leave it as ugly as it is on purpose, not to imply, or because if I'm gonna spend money, I'm not gonna spend it.
Could we get those businesses?
Yes,
I'd be
because I'm-
interested in talking to them.
That would be great. That would be great, because they're trying to improve the property, they're trying to add on it, and we figured out if we add on it, we're gonna incur another $400,000 to $800,000, if not more. And they said, we're gonna leave it a gravel lot, we're not putting lights, we're not putting trees, and it's gonna be plastic banner signs forever. So I'd love to
And
figure
that's
out.
gonna stay the same regardless of whether this changes or not. People still have the choice not to redevelop the property.
They would love to, they wanna just make an addition, however, just making that little tiny addition is more than 10%. That will incur them to put so much more cost, and they're just scrap the whole idea.
Yeah, and that's the trade-off you make, right? If you don't require them to bring it up, then you'll continue another X amount of years with what they already have, right?
Yeah.
So that's the decision that gets made.
And eventually, they may
How about
sell.
how about farmland? We have a few pieces of farmland on State Street, like north of 1600s.
They just follow whatever the zone is.
This would go to C2.
So if someone decides to do this and they have it looks like the sidewalk is in a different place, right? Because it's a 15-foot setback. What's the transition from the old property to the new property? Does the city take care of that, or,
No, the property owner would be required to maintain that in front of the sidewalk.
No, but.
They transition.
Yeah, between properties, you're gonna be going down the sidewalk on one property and all of a sudden the sidewalk's 15 feet.
There'll be transition. There's several that have done it recently, that have, switched their sidewalk, and we've asked them to at least come close to meeting that standard, so you'll see some that are actually, meandering back.
It's part of beautification.
Sun River Gardens in 24 is a good example of that.
Yeah, Sun River's a good example. the bank, Alpine Credit Union is another good example of how they meander it back. I mean, we're not gonna get the whole corridor unless the city wants to pony up the money to do it. And so really, it's when redevelopment comes, or a big project comes, that's when we're gonna get there. University Parkway is an example. Those improvements were done all at once because UTA and UDOT came in and made those improvements. The city as a whole is not going to make those changes. It's gonna be, unless there's some significant change. But right now, it's really property owner driven as far as improvements.
So, and currently there are no incentives offered to make any of these changes. Is that something that would be beneficial?
Only if we had the funds to do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, incentives are great, they do drive redevelopment, but yeah, that funding would have to be established by multiple options. One is city council funding, another option is redevelopment agency creating redevelopment areas, which is what Orem has used to redevelop University Parkway over the years.
And then the tax credit, that was,
So it's not uncommon. We just haven't done one
Pardon?
recently.
like a tax credit. that
Yeah,
was-
it's, I've heard a good explanation is it's like a coupon off your property taxes.
Mhm. Yeah, and banks do loan on that for
Yeah,
the,
they
for the
do,
property owner
correct.
to beautify, so, I mean, if, or just like the University Place did.
Yeah, I mean, we've got RDAs, the entire Word Perfect campus was built with an RDA. The US Synthetic Orem Business Park down on Geneva Road was an RDA. Macy's, pretty much everything on University Parkway, west of, State Street was done with RDA money.
Walmart, all those.
Walmart, yeah.
Wasn't Lowe's years ago?
I believe Lowe's is in an RDA, that entire Hobby Lobby, Lowe's development as well. So we got time, right? So I'll just go into a little, development background, but, so essentially, a developer comes to the city and says, I wanna build this project, but is the city interested in helping us out so we can bring you, let's say, a Walmart? So the city says, yes, we'll work with you, we'll go to our RDA board, which is the city council with a different hat on. They create an RDA area, they go to all the other taxing entities and they try to get them to participate as well. And then what they do is they lock in that current property tax value, and anything that grows above and beyond that from the new development is, a portion of that is captured, and that's used to reimburse the developer for improvements they've made. And so all of that's kind of negotiated, and Orem's used that very successfully. In fact, most of our RDAs done back in the late 80s, early 90s are expiring. They've been in existence for 30 years, and all that money's been spent to develop those areas. So there's your quick 101 on incentives.
And RDA stands for?
So an RDA stands for multiple things. The redevelopment agency, which is the city council with another hat. An RDA stands for redevelopment area under the old state code. Currently they're called, 3 years ago they were called CRAs, community redevelopment areas. Now they're called, I think they're called they're CRAs now, they were CDAs. So now they're community redevelopment areas. They were community development areas. The code changes, the legislature changes it every so many years and everything kind of
And
changes.
I actually think the legislature is looking at making more changes this year,
Yeah.
so.
So
We'll see what we get.
acronyms might change.
Make them more favorable or less favorable for us?
Most likely less favorable, as far as the city is concerned, or as far as developers are concerned.
That's all we got. Back to you.
Back to me. So can we go over the standard formats for meeting for all of us, call to order, invocation, because we just would like to set a precedent. I was gonna ask if there's any handbook, because I know when I volunteered, there was not an explanation of how things work in simple terms. Also, there aren't any requirements that we're required to do, like the classes we took, or a certain amount of times you can't miss, which is, I didn't know about that. Those areas, is there any city issue?
So there's a city ordinance that outlines what planning commission duties are.
Okay.
I think we're in the process of modifying a little bit of that.
Okay.
But that, I would point you to that, and I can send you a link to
Yeah,
that.
send the link to us, that'd be great.
But the thing you're talking about is, you're not supposed to miss more than 25% of the meetings, and, if you do miss more than 25%, then it probably, you might be evaluated as to whether it's wise to keep you serving or not, so. but that's the expectation, that's kind of what you're
Yeah,
asking,
yeah,
right?
yeah, those are things I recently found out about.
Yeah, yeah.
You're not ever gonna miss a meeting,
Now,
right?
Barry, you ready?
No, but Hazel, did you have a question about like, the call to order and the invocation and all
Yeah,
that
that
kind of
would be good
stuff?
for all of us to go over it.
So, I mean, there's no set in stone way of how you have to do that. I mean, I think you can do it, you know, the way you want. I mean, typically, obviously, the chair is gonna call a meeting to order, right? And it has been the tradition to have an invocation of some kind over the years, but you're not required to have that. If you all decide you don't wanna do that, you could dispense with that.
Yeah.
So that's up to you.
It's not gonna.
So, yeah, so, and then obviously, once you have that, once you've had the invocation, then typically you just jump right into the agenda items, you call the first item and then jump right into the meeting.
Did we finish item 3.3? That was all of it. Did we look at the, what the staff recommends for us to do?
So, yeah, I'll have that, basically just a recommendation that you forward a positive recommendation to the city council. And as Steve mentioned, it's fairly long, but you will need to, whoever does that will need the entire.
So for the positive or negative recommendation.
And Hasten might, as a reminder, be sure to open the public hearings.
Yes.
And close the public hearings. And you control the spirit of the meeting, right? And the calmness of it, and you have control of the room, and that's your duty.
Yeah.
So,
Typically, once you close the public hearing, you want to close it unless you reopen it. You don't want to allow people to continue to speak if it's closed. But again, you're the chair. So.
Well, I appreciate your help. Okay.
Another question on 3.3, we don't need to pull back up. We've talked about several things, and I think that in reading through the packets and going to the city meetings and the public meetings and the thing that was in the hall a couple weeks ago, we've talked about a lot of issues. What does city staff see as unintended consequences, or are there questions that we haven't asked, things that we ought to be aware of? I know we'll hear some of that in public comments.
Jim, unintended consequences are, until they appear, we don't really know they're there, right? But,
Right, but you have more experience than I do, so
Yeah.
you might see things I
Well, what are
don't see.
some
but-
consequences you see that we probably wouldn't?
I think the council is going to face a lot of pressure for putting housing somewhere in Orem, and right now there really isn't that location, so. We've already had a number of developers coming to us looking for places, and there's not an option for you really, so. That's just my opinion.
You're talking high density housing, correct? Yeah.
Well, and even as we talked about, townhomes and duplexes or fourplexes, there's limitation, and I think I support the strategy that we're coming from to keep residential and not throw more apartments in residential areas. But I also feel like this is like a step one toward solutions, and there's some ongoing discussions that need to happen to identify where can we have this growth? Where can our kids and our grandkids live if they want to stay close? Do they have to go all the way to Santaquin or Saratoga or Eagle Mountain, or what can we do around here? Not that we need to solve the whole county's housing thing, but I think there is some growth that would be acceptable.
And we can also, our council can also say we're not going to allow any of that, and that's fine. But there will be pressure, there will be developers coming nonstop and bugging them, and Lene and Terry will be happy to say, no, you're not gonna bow to your pressure, right? But they will. It's just like the farmer that owns 12 acres that developer after developer comes to trying to buy it until they finally cave in, right? Or they give up, or they die and the kids sell it, you know, it's just that kind of pressure that you'll just have to get used to people coming to you.
But I think the intent is going forward, you know, we're kind of proposing a reset, right? And then going forward, we'll look at individual applications for particular pieces of property to see if a townhouse development, for example, makes sense in a particular piece of property. Or maybe even some high density or mixed use development makes sense on a particular piece of property. And a developer can make that application, and then it can be evaluated and decided by you and the city council.
What, the 15 cents an hour that I'm making?
Get all those phone calls
Oh, yeah,
and
we love
emails.
it, we love it.
My husband says it's 5 cents an hour.
So Jason, something really important for the new members is you need to take your salad, write your name on it, put it in the fridge if you're not eating. And then you still have to guard it, because sometimes people think that after means their name.
It's true.
So you wanna do that before you go in there, write your name, put your, and
Right.
get your water bottle in there.
Oh, and did they tell you about the whole push the button, so?
Yes.
Okay, because I didn't know about that, so I sat there in the seat, and I'm like, what is these buttons for?
Is it an obvious button?
The red button.
Okay,
The
the
white
red
button doesn't have the. It's required.
So the white button is the
Yeah.
So is it your lungs?
I've had CT scans, my lungs are fine.
I know some of those numbers are down
Next
there.
year is,
So I had a request that those record numbers.
Test me for everything else.
Even if you
So,
continue,
does
well,
it affect?
I mean, I guess, yeah.
One of the other things that you're sending me to a speech pathologist.
What's that? You know, I've been looking at this development that's on trip. Even before the council takes time.
I was gonna ask that, I didn't really know anything, because I know it's so weird, but I'm like, I don't expect
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've heard those rumors. A lot of words are out. Right, no. Right, I hear you. I certainly wasn't aware of any of this. Yeah.
testing.
That's what I thought too.
Mike is right here.
How do I start that? This is a call to order for our City Planning Commission today. I want to welcome everybody for coming in. And yeah, mic is on. Get closer? Okay. So thanks for coming and showing up today to our Planning Commission. We want to welcome all the new Planning Commission members, April and Madeline and Mary. Thank you so much for coming in. We'd like to start with the invocation and ask April to volunteer that for us, please.
Our Father in heaven, we are so grateful for this opportunity that we have to gather together as a planning commission and as members of the public. We ask that there may be a spirit of peace and respect here as we have our discussion and move forward with plans for making changes to our city. We pray for all those who do serve our city and our country, that they may have the help that they need, the health as well that they need to make wise choices. We offer our gratitude again in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Carol, start us up.
Right. Item 3.1 is a site plan to approve Calls Place, Orem City, located at 1543 West, 1430 North. So you can see it here, it's between Geneva Road and the I-15. They want to put 3 office warehouse buildings in this location. It would be similar to what is directly to the south in the Orem Technology Campus. This is their site plan showing the 3 buildings. Buildings 1 and 2 would be larger, building 3 would be smaller and set at an angle over near the freeway. This is their final plat. And these are the elevations for buildings 1 and 2. Buildings 1 and 2 are very similar, except for size. Building 2 is a little bit larger, and the units are a little bit larger. Building 3 is smaller. And again, these are office warehouses. So these are the parking requirements. The parking requirements are different for office space than they are for warehouse space. So they have to figure each one separately, and then as you get over 50,000 square feet in the warehouse, you also have a different number. So these are the parking requirements, and they have met those. These are their landscape plans for buildings 1 and 2 and building 3. These are the concept plans. Again, these are going to be office warehouse space. And then building 3. And their floor plans. And so here's where in building 1 you can see the units are a little bit different size than in building 2, and then building 3. This is what it currently looks like as you're looking west from the I-15. And staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the site plan of Calls Place, Orem City in the PD 36 zone. Did you have any questions for me?
Any question regarding that? Okay. Well, this is
we'll make the motion. Well, it's, this looks very straightforward. There's nothing about it that requires any changes.
The applicant may have something to add, I'm not sure.
Do you have anything to add, Jason?
Well, I would ask the applicant if they have anything.
The applicant here? Please come and state your name and if you had anything to add to it.
My name is Kyle Spencer with Northern Engineering, and honestly, she's given a pretty great summary of the building and site plans, and we're just excited to finally be here in front of you today, so thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Anybody want to make the motion?
I'll do it. I move that we approve the site plan of Calls Place, Orem City, located generally at 1543 West, 1430 North in the PD 36 zone.
Barry, you need to add the condition, please.
Add the condition in there. With the condition.
With the condition, the applicant obtains an access permit for Geneva Road from UDOT Region 3 and a